St. Elizabeth of the Trinity, Part 1. Life in the World. On 18 July 1880, Captain Joseph Cartes hurried across the French army camp at Avord near Bourges to the chaplain's house. His wife Marie was in labor with their first child but was dangerously ill. Both her life and the baby's life were in danger. There was cause for concern because Marie and Joseph had married late and had never expected to have children. Joseph was now 48 and Marie was 34. So could the Monsignor and God save them? When the abbé offered mass for them that all would be well. The chaplain did so, and as soon as he finished the mass, Elizabeth Carthage came safely into this world. 2 years later, Elizabeth, nicknamed Sabeth, was joined by sister Margaret, always known as Guet, and the Carthage family was complete. In those first years, Captain and Madame Carthage had good reason to feel anything but blessed in their elder daughter. Whereas Margaret had a loving and gentle character, Elizabeth was a real chatterbox, had inherited all the fire and spirit of her parents' military background. She had a quick temper and a will of iron. Slightest opposition would send her into tantrum, and all her mother would do was to lock her into a room where she would scream and kick the furniture until she had calmed down. With good reason, she was called the Little Captain. She showed this imperiousness when her mother took Elizabeth to visit her elderly parents in St. Hilary. A mission was being held there, ending with a special service. There was blessing for the children. One of the sisters organizing it came to ask for the loan of Elizabeth's favorite doll, Janet, to stand in for the baby Jesus. Unfortunately, Elizabeth recognized her doll, and to the amusement of the congregation, her eyes blazing loudly, she demanded back her doll. Nevertheless, even at an early age and in that devout household, her parents noted that she had genuine love for Jesus and was quiet and prayerful when in church. First Confession and First Holy Communion. In 1886, Captain Carthage retired from the army, having diagnosed with a heart condition, and the family moved to Dijon. In the following year, first Elizabeth's beloved grandfather died, and later her father died in that year. It was a difficult time for the family because Madame Carthage had only a service pension to live on, so they rented the upstairs floor of a house owned by Monsignor Capues just around the corner from the Carmelite monastery. It was a crucial time for Elizabeth. She made her first confession around Christmas in 1887 in preparation for First Holy Communion in 5 years' time. During this period, there was a visiting canon, Angels, a close family friend. Elizabeth climbed onto his lap and whispered, "I am going to be a nun. I will be a nun." Her mother overheard, and despite having considered a religious vocation herself when she was younger, she was horrified but hoped that it was just a childish fancy. At the age of 7, her mother began to see that she attained regularly the Sunday Mass and the Eucharist remained in the heart of her spiritual life. Having made her confession, realizing the effect her tantrums were having on her beloved mother, Elizabeth began to make heroic efforts to control her temper. Also, Madame Carthage had threatened to postpone the date of her First Holy Communion if she didn't improve. She used her iron will against herself, as it were, and she was also motivated by ever deepening love for Jesus. It was a real battle in the small things of a child's life. One friend remembered seeing tears in her eyes as she gave away in deciding what game she should play. Her parish priest declared that she would become either a saint or a demon, and at one point he tried to control her high spirits by making her kneel on the road. Both her daughters were highly musically gifted, so Madame Carthage enrolled them in the Dijon Conservatory to study piano. It was judged that while Guet had more technical skill, Elizabeth played with more sensitivity and depth. Elizabeth was becoming more calm and gentle and found in music that she could express a love for Jesus beyond words. Elizabeth made her first communion on 19th of April 1891 at the age of 12, declaring it to be the most beautiful day of her life. In the afternoon, Elizabeth went with her mother to the Carmelite monastery to meet the prioress, Mother Mary of Jesus, who gave her a small card with a picture and a verse on it which gave the meaning of her name, Elizabeth, the house of God, the dwelling place of the Trinity. She was confirmed on 8th June 1891. Determination to be a nun. As she passed into her teens, her mother would not help but realize that her daughter's determination to be a nun was no passing fancy. She may not have known that Elizabeth had made a private vow of virginity when she was 14, but a frequent visit to the Carmel forced Madame Carthage to realize that her daughter's thoughts were turning more and more to the cloister. At one mass one day, Elizabeth had heard within herself the call to Carmel, and from her bedroom window she could see the grounds of Carmel, and the nuns were going about their work and prayer. Her mother, on the other hand, was determined that Elizabeth should look elsewhere for her future, perhaps as a music teacher. Elizabeth left the conservatory at the age of 16 due to the politics there, but she was deprived of the award for excellence that should have been hers, but Gued won it 2 years later. Because their general education was not in keeping up with their musical studies, Madame Carthage engaged a tutor, Miss Forey. In order to know the girls better, she gave them essay to write to describe their physical and moral portrait. Elizabeth was not exactly complimentary with her physical appearance, and for her moral character, without revealing her inner spiritual life, she wrote, I would say that I have rather a good character. I am cheerful and I must confess somewhat scattered brained. I have a good heart. I am by nature a cautious. Some say one should be somewhat. I am not lazy. I know that work makes us happy. Without being a model of patience, I usually know how to control myself. I do not hold grudges. So much for my moral portrait. I have my defects and alas few good qualities. I hope to acquire them. There was a very deep bond between Madame Carthage and her daughters. They dubbed themselves the Three, and Madame Carthage could not bear the thought of Elizabeth being shut away from her forever in a convent. And Elizabeth was growing to a lovely girl, graceful, simple, and elegant, with a charm and vivacity that endeared her to everyone. Her mother wanted her to meet some suitable young army officer, perhaps for whom she would make an excellent wife, and she felt sure that soon there will be no lack of offer. The idea of her becoming nun was unthinkable. Call to Carmel. When at the age of 16, Elizabeth told her mother of a call to Carmel, to a great distress, her mother refused her permission to visit Carmel or speak to the nuns. In order to distract Elizabeth, her mother launched her into a ground of visits to relatives, parties, and country trips, balls, and military reviews that formed the principal occupation of young girls of her class at that time. Despite their relative poverty and loss of family status being a military wife, they had loyal friends who discreetly helped them out financially by inviting them to their houses, especially during summer months. This was no sacrifice on their part because the two girls and their mother made delightful guests. Elizabeth loved the times they stayed with the Roland aunts, her mother's sisters at Calipa. That little corner of heaven, a tiny village, was on the backdrop of the Pyrenees, where she could walk in the tranquility of the evening. She was equally enthralled by the scenery of Lucerne, where they took a landau to the Gulf of Health, high up in the mountains. To the terror of the rest of the party, Elizabeth and her friend Magdalene pranced around the edge of the awesome ravine, completely unaffected by the enormous drop plunging to the waters below. It was at Calipa that Elizabeth probably began writing her diary. She also began writing poems which helped her to put into words her spiritual journey, especially after she entered Carmel. With their musical accomplishments, Elizabeth and Goethe were often called upon to play the piano at dances and soirees. Elizabeth wrote to her friend Alice, our stay there has been a round of pleasures, dancing, martinis, musical martinis, country expeditions, one thing after another. We hardly leave the piano in the music shops in the tabis, can scarcely provide us with enough to play on sight. The girls had a wide circle of friends, and so she was writing to Alice again. We are having a really delightful time at Luneville, where lunching with these and dining with those, as well as frequent tennis parties with some lovely girls. In a word, we don't have a minute to ourselves and don't know where we are. In all these visits and time with Elizabeth was most appreciated not only for her kindness and thoughtfulness, but also a tremendous drive and sense of fun. Her friend Francois summed her up at this time. She did not love the world, but she was in it and seemed to enjoy herself. Parish activities and a longing for solitude. When Elizabeth was at home, she was very much involved in parish activities. She especially enjoyed helping the children, teaching catechism, helping to run a youth club for the working class children of the parish. She was a gifted storyteller, able to keep them enthralled for hours, and was so popular with them that she had to conceal her address from them to prevent her house from being invaded at all hours. Nevertheless, these activities did not prevent her longing for Carmel and the silence that she would find there. At this time, her mother became seriously ill due to a snake bite, and Elizabeth was faced with the prospect of never being able to enter Carmel. Now she had to look after her mother. Therefore, she purposed to become a Carmelite in the world, realizing that Carmelite of a charism of apostolic prayer could be lived in the world. Later helped her when in Carmel to counsel her friends in following the interior life of prayer that was open to all. She took for her own St. Catherine of Siena's teaching of having an inner cell in which she prayed to her master, as she loved to call Jesus, whenever she was. Nevertheless, her inner struggle was affecting her health, and this was brought to a head during a parish mission of 1899. Elizabeth kept a diary of this time, which is still existent. Her sister Gwet realized how deeply Elizabeth affected her mother's continued opposition despite her own anguish at the thought of losing her sister to the cloister. She went to Madame Carthage to plead her sister's cause. When her mother realized that Elizabeth's health and happiness was at stake, she agreed, heartbroken, to allow her to enter, but not before she was 21. There was still 3 years away, so Madame Carthage thought to herself, and anything could happen in the meantime. Overjoyed as she was at her mother's agreement, Elizabeth was heartbroken to see the suffering of the two she loved the most on earth, with all three in tears. But the call of Jesus was too strong for her to resist. That evening she wrote in her diary, "I would do anything to spare them the slightest pain, and it is I who am causing them so much suffering. And yet, Master, I know you want me. And you are giving me the strength and the courage I need. In my pain, I feel a deep, deep peace and a calm. Yes, I will soon be answering your call. During these 2 years, I want to try even harder to be a bride less unworthy of you, my beloved." Finding a spiritual director, Madame Carthage now allowed Elizabeth to visit the Carmel again, where she made many friends. The Dijon Carmel at that time was full up and preparing to make a foundation at Paray-le-Monial under Mother Mary of Jesus. Elizabeth joined a group of young women hoping to enter Carmel. The prioress called this group her postulants outside the walls. They came to offer spiritual guidance and help the sisters with the task in the sacristan chapel. Elizabeth was also fortunate to meet a priest on her visits to Carmel, Father Valley, who became her spiritual director. She wanted his advice because new things were developing in her spiritual life that she wanted to understand. "It feels," she said to a friend, "as if someone is within me, as if I were dwelt in." During her times of prayer, Elizabeth seemed to be able to be less and less for herself. Father Valley helped her to understand that she was truly the house of God, in whom dwelt the Trinity, in the words of St. Paul. "Do you not understand that you are God's temple and that God's Spirit is dwelling in you?" Her inner self contained a divine guest. She was also reading the newly published autobiography of St. Therese of Lisieux and wrote her own act of surrender to God. In another prayer, she said she wanted to be a saint, to give her heart wholly to Him, to do only His will. She offered Him the cell of her heart to be the little Bethany. "Come and live there. I love you so much." Not for us. Elizabeth was soon to be 21. Then one day Madame Carthage came home in great excitement. She had received an offer for Elizabeth's hand for a most suitable and eligible officer. Surely she would not dream of refusing. But Elizabeth did refuse and firmly, and her mother had to bow to the inevitable. Young men at her sorry, more discerning than this officer, who saw her beauty, her charm and her vivacity, saw also a look in her eyes that took her far from the gaiety of the evening, and knew she was not for us. The date was finally fixed for 2nd August 1901, but there was one problem. Mother Mary of Jesus had decided that Elizabeth should enter the new foundation at Paray-le-Monial, which had been founded on 30th June 1901, and her bags had already been packed and sent on ahead. However, her mother was seriously worried about the effect such hardship would have on her daughter's health and wrote to the Mother Prioress Mary of Jesus expressing her worries. So the prioress immediately wrote to Elizabeth herself, "You are no doubt aware that your mother and Margaret has asked to let you stay in Dijon. Seems that this is also what you would prefer. I see in all this the will of the good God, which we should love and do without a second thought. Give yourself to the Lord whenever He wills. I do not want you here if it isn't what He wants. So I shall receive you for Dijon, my dear child. Bring all that you have of heart and soul to love our Lord." Elizabeth herself was ready to accept all the hardship and privation of the new Carmel, but her heart had really been set on Dijon. Now God's will could clearly be seen. To fulfill a high vocation of intense union with God, Elizabeth needed the stability and the regularity of the established community of Dijon that would give her the environment she required. As a final gesture, Elizabeth went and bought herself a new pair of gloves for her last dance, so that no one would suspect that she was to enter Carmel so soon. What did the price of the gloves matter when her heart was already in the cloister that was to be her home? Ready for the plunge. Elizabeth expressed to a friend her desire to suffer for the love of Jesus, and the friend had replied, "God takes people like yourself at their word and accepts their self-giving." With her lovely smile, Elizabeth had replied, "I am ready to take the plunge. I hope I do suffer. That's what I am entering Carmel for, and if the good God overlooked me for a single day, I would think He had forgotten me." Now that same friend was with her and her family as they attended Mass, and Elizabeth prepared to go through the doors into the Carmel's cloister. Their eyes met as they recalled their conversation. "I can't describe what I saw," she said later. Her looks were almost angelic, no longer human. Her eyes were luminous, transparent. They shone with a heavenly light. I'll never forget the impression they made on me. That was the last time I saw her this side of Carmel's grills.